Good afternoon, everybody. We are in Denver broadcasting. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Great, man. I wanted to go over the 5 laws for life and business this week. This is episode 6 of the Mountains and Leadership podcast. So let's just get right into it. So, Mark, if you had to give your own list of important laws for life, what would they be? Just off the cuff.
Oh, my goodness. I wouldn't say laws, more like principles.
Principles, things to live by.
Right. Have integrity. If you say something, do something. Over promise, under deliver. It's like things like that. Like, be knowledgeable about what you do. If you're striving to be the best at what you do, like you're gonna be a top person in your area. So
excellence and innovation.
Yeah. The Bible talks about serving your master as though serving God, right? It's like and when you're in sales like we are, or you have, our masters are our clients.
Right.
So we serve them. So it's more principles. It's definitely making sure that you do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
And I'd say
your words should mean something, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And don't be negative. Like, the world's negative enough. Like, it is like,
don't be a dirtbag. How about that?
Yeah, that's a good one. That kind of goes in with the integrity, but yeah, being a dirtbag, it gets out real quick.
Yeah.
Especially, and if you work in a certain community like we do in the real estate and mortgage industry, if you're a dirtbag,
people know it.
Yep.
Man, okay. Well, I'm going to answer that question for myself too. And then we've got like a formal list that we've put together, just some laws for life and business. It's not comprehensive, but I didn't
even know all these dudes were like made laws. So,
so for me, what would be mine? I think the first one would be integrity, and that a subset of integrity would be trust and honor. If you can't trust somebody, if somebody looks you in the eye and they give you their word, it ought to mean something. I come from a background where eye contact and a firm handshake used to mean something, and it doesn't anymore for a lot of people. For me, it does. And I will be quick to remove somebody from my business panel of people I work with if they do not have integrity. Do what you say you're going to do. I mean, sometimes things happen and we work through it.
And be quick to own up to it.
But like, own it or get ahead of it. Like, as a team, like, let's say you got your own business, I've got mine, and we're working together. Your business is helping me with my business, or vice versa. And you promise something and it's like, okay, it's time to deliver that. And I've promised someone else something contingent upon your promise. It makes me look bad when you can't deliver. So, like, go in and say, hey guys, or hey Pat, I know, I said this, we're having some issues, heads up. I just want to get this in front of you. We're working through it. Here's what we're doing. Like, that's honor. That's integrity. That's trust.
What you just said, it just reminded me of our first podcast, that you're like, how many degrees removed does your circle influence?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so if
like the building your tribe one, that's episode 2.
Building your tribe, right? So if my actions are, if your promise, if your word is contingent upon my word on something, and my actions are contingent upon somebody else's word, yeah, you're right. Like, how far removed is that person that completely and totally influences what you're doing, and then you're influencing this next person? It's a domino effect.
It's a domino effect. If you understand that, it hopefully helps you operate differently as a leader in your business, right? And like, for me, that's a number one tenet is integrity, and so all those things kind of roll up under that. Another one would be, I like to be on the cutting edge of things, and so like innovation is huge. And if you look at our core values for the Smith Global Group, smithglobalgroup.com is where my website is, but our core values, one of them is innovation, and so. You as a person who's providing a service to a potential client, a consumer, whatever you want to call it, I call them my clients because they're people. They expect you to be on the forefront of things and to have that knowledge and to be able to pivot and adjust very quickly. So innovation, thinking outside the box, thinking off the cuff, being able to maneuver quickly is something huge for me. And then if I gave you 3, so what was it? It was integrity, it was innovation, and then the last thing would be stick-to-itiveness. Stick-to-itiveness. Stick-to-it-iveness. If that's
It's almost like that movie, The Internship. Your googliness.
Right. But I mean, can you start something and finish it? And then when you start something, if it isn't going well, can you stick to it for a while? And I love people like that, man, because there's a difference between a dreamer and a doer. I was just having a conversation with another guy. We're looking at opening another company. And
would that be called perseverance?
Perseverance, 100%. And, but this idea of dreamer and doer, right?
Right.
Dreamers, they won't stick to something. Well, that would be nice someday. And it's like, no, man, like put pen to paper, reverse engineer it, define the steps forward and go do something. Execute. And when you're trying to execute, if it doesn't play out right, stick to it, readjust, finish it, finish what you start. So stick-to-itiveness. That's
that great segue. Look at this first one you brought up. Okay. You just said, put it on paper, reverse engineer it, and figure it out, right?
Right. So our podcast today is the 5 laws for life and business. So Mark's going to get into number 1 here.
Yeah. That's Kydland's Law.
Yeah.
If you can write the problem down clearly, then the issue is half solved.
That's right. Being able to know what you don't know is important. And I think that it's a wise man that can do that. If you know what you don't know, then you know what questions to ask. And when you write stuff down, it sort of teases those things out. What do I not know? And that's 50% of the problem right there. And so Kydland's Law basically says, write it down. That's a step 1. And that's 50% of your problem solved right there. The other 50% will be based on what happens next. And so,
how many beautiful things have we seen come out of think tanks?
Huge
like
things, man.
You take a bunch of brains, you put them in a room, lock the door, and let them go.
Well, you hear about all these people that, I mean, they've done big things in their life. Like Steve, who Steve Harvey is, the comedian. Yeah. He has all the talk shows and stuff. Man, he talks about a vision board. I don't know if you've ever seen that video, but he talks about having a vision board, putting it up there, and writing down what your vision is. And that's sort of what this is alluding to. Like, if you've got a problem you're trying to solve, like I've got this vision, I want to go to point A to point B, write it down. But he gets a vision board. There's all kinds of people that talk about those vision boards. I don't know if you've heard of anyone that does that, but do you do that by chance? Or
I'm one of those guys that, I should. Like my daughter, like she has dry erase markers she writes on her bathroom mirror.
Yeah.
And like she keeps things like on the forefront of her brain.
Mm-hmm.
I should do a vision board.
My daughter, I'll brag on her for a minute. She's training and studying to go into the Air Force. And we looked up the criteria required for her to meet the physical demands. And it's like a mile under a certain amount of time, push-ups and setups and stuff. If you go in our garage where our squat rack and our jiu-jitsu mats are and stuff, we've got a dry erase board, and she's scaled it all out and put tables there and put all the numbers. And she goes down and tracks her progress every day. And that's really awesome to see her doing that at such a young age. But I believe in those, and I believe in, writing your plans down, and because then you get to see like, hey, does this make sense, right? You see it in writing, it kind of does something different for you.
No, absolutely.
But yeah, man, so that's number 1. I'll catch number 2.
And clearly it says, clearly is the operative word in that statement. Clearly
write your plans down. Yeah. Yeah. Like so, have a clear,
sometimes clarity. It's like you have a 30,000 foot view, but you're not seeing the minutia. Like you don't, right. There's like there are a lot more details you're missing out on. Let's be clear. Mm-hmm. Let's get down to you're good at doing that. I'm more of a, sometimes I'm more of a fly by the seat of my pants. I'm going to be like, all right, sounds good. Let's go.
Yeah.
Ready, fire, aim.
I think that's why we play off each other pretty well. I don't know. There's a lot of value in, you've helped me get a lot more done, just sort of get, with your style of things too. So I'll give you credit on that. But yeah, man, I think that having it written clearly is huge. And like for me, so I'll tell you a quick story. Maybe we could do that. So I've been married to my wife, Ruth. If you guys look at our website, you'll see Ruth there. She's got Ruth's Corner. You can download recipes for free and stuff on our website. She's awesome. But when I married Ruth, before I married her, I would sit and talk with her and I'd say, what do you want out of life? How many kids do you want? Where do you want to live? What kind of home do you want? Oh, you like to sew. You must want a sewing or stitching room of some kind. What okay, so she's one of 5 kids. She's like, I don't want any middle kids. I was a middle kid, so I want an even number of kids. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's either 2, 4, 6, 8. I mean, we're not going to do 8 kids, but these are things that we're thinking through. And so anyway, as I collected that information, I was like, okay, are we equally yoked, right? Now that requires a plan. How am I going to do this? And I started doing the math on this, and I'm like, I need to go back to school to make some more money, which is ultimately what got me into engineering. I was looking at becoming a doctor, and I was like, that's 12 years of at least minimum of school. I was like, I need something quicker. So engineering 4-year, that was kind of what led me down that road, or a piece or an element of it. And so as I began to put all this together, Ruth went on a mission trip to Africa, and we were still together. We were together every day for 6 months, and then she went to Africa for 6 months and to do missions. And so she was working on the African Mercy ships off the coast in Sierra Leone.
Wow.
And you walk down the road, bullet holes in the buildings and everything, and it's just crazy, man. I mean, she was in a taxi at one point in Sierra Leone that ran over this little kid and just kept driving, and they the nurses that were in the taxi made him stop. But she's over there doing all that, and so I'm back here. And I'm like, okay, I got to go back to school. I've got, I want to marry this girl. I mean, she goes to get on the airplane, and she hands me this book. She goes, well, I guess we should rip this Band-Aid off. And she pulls this book out. She'd written me a letter for every day that she was going to be gone for 6 months. And so she says, don't read this all in one place. But I was like, I definitely need to make plans, and I need to write this down. I'm going to marry this girl. And so anyway, I began to make those plans. And so we had one phone call a night. And she was in Africa, and I'd ask her stuff like, hey, I'm not trying to rush. Like, I'm not saying we're going to get married. I don't want to push, but let's assume if we were going to get married, hypothetically, what kind of house would you want? And all this other stuff. That poor lady, she answered, I don't know how many questions I had. I had her filling forms out.
I couldn't imagine how. Yeah. You're kind of retentive on that.
Dude, I will tell you something, man. When I want to do something and I want to do it right, I'm no nonsense, man. It's like all or nothing. And
but here's the best thing I love about your story, though, is like you've gone and done all this, but like you grew up in Texas and you were a bouncer in a biker bar.
Yeah, and there's lots of stories that
right. But then you went to Texas A&M, got your degree in
petroleum engineering. Yeah.
And then you worked in the oil field. You worked for BP. You worked for some really, really big companies.
Uh-huh.
All with this whole like, I got brass knuckles in my back pocket mentality. You know what I'm saying?
Not anymore. But I still have the mental fortitude and the get up and go factor. It's man. Early on, as a younger man, And this is a thing for the men of we're getting off on a tangent here, and that's okay. We're just going to roll with this for a minute. But the younger men in our society now, you got a lot of strength and a lot of energy there. If it was just directed toward the right things, these men could do amazing things with their lives. And I'm so thankful that I had good men and I had a good tribe around me. There was an inflection point where I sort of walked away from the bar scene and barroom brawling and doing all that, and just sort of got it together. And about a year or so later, I met Ruth. And the men around me at that time, there were some my age, some a little bit older, some a little older. And it's like, read this book, Pat. Read that book, Pat. Let's meet up and talk about that, Pat. And they just sort of took that strength and redirected it. And I'm thankful for those guys, 100%. And our pastor of our church back home, his name is, he's no longer with us. He died of cancer, but he was this big bald-headed Cajun guy named Gary DeSalvo from Louisiana. And he had cancer, and at one point they had to remove his eye. And so Gary, he decides, well, I like LSU. So he gets this tiger eye, and he's got a tiger eye for a glass eye, right? That was our pastor. And, I probably wouldn't have taken to these overly like
suit and tie,
whatever. But don't get me wrong, I can be in a suit and tie and hold my own in a boardroom with C-level executives. I've done that
now, but then
not at the time. It wouldn't have echoed well with me. And so, I had men like that were people I looked up to that sort of got me redirected. And, it was awesome. And, all that planning I did, those guys were the ones I slapped those plans down in front of. And I would meet with them on the weekend and I'd say, okay, here's my plan, all my plans, like punch holes in this. Find out what's wrong with it. What do you see that's not reasonable based on your wisdom, your life experience? Punch holes in this, and I'm going to redo it until we get this thing refined to a point where this is an actual plan.
So, and hence the clearly.
Yeah, very clearly defined. And there were like backup and like justifications and backups for, well, why do you want that goal? What is the motivation behind that goal? So we were even looking at things from that perspective too. And it got me a long way in life. And you can plow a large field really fast with a good plan. And if you have a cause behind that plan, I mean, that's where the speed comes in.
Well, like you said, I think a couple weeks ago, you said, if you're going to chop down a tree, the first thing you do is spend 7 hours sharpening the axe.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, if you had 6 hours to chop a tree down, you spend the first 5 sharpening the axe and making sure it had good integrity. That last hour, it probably only take you about 30 minutes. You go knock that tree down really fast. And that's effectively what we did. I mean, I remember, so when Ruth was in Africa, I would go, so I had Maddie from a previous marriage, and Maddie was probably about 5 years old at that time. And as a father, when you have a little girl, you think about things a little bit different. Well, actually a lot different.
Oh, I know.
Than the general populace does as a man, right? And so I began to think to myself, I'm like, I would want to know what knucklehead's dating my daughter. I know that we're grown adults at this point. We're like in our early to mid 20s. But I would want to know what knucklehead's dating my daughter. So I just like picked up the phone and called Ruth's parents. And I'm like, hey, could I come down and visit? And I think at one point, they told me they thought I was coming down to ask her permission to marry her. And I never did. I just kept coming down there and they're like, when is he going to do this? And I didn't know that. I just was coming down there to just engage them and get to know who they were while she was in Africa. The first time I went down there, they gave me her old room where she used to sleep, and they had all of her little girl pictures by the bed and stuff. And it's like, you see her through their lens, right? And you want to honor that as a man. And, but anyway, that planning, going back to Kennelin's law here, write it down and have a clear plan. At some point down the road, I knew Ruth was coming home within a month or two. And so I would take her dad to breakfast on Saturday mornings when I would come down there to visit. And they lived 3 hours away. I'd drive down, I'd stay the night, then I'd see if he wanted to go to breakfast, and we'd sit and talk. Well, on this one particular morning, I asked him, I said, hey, I have a question for you. Can I ask you a question? And he does this, okay. And he kind of sits up in his seat. I think he knew it was coming. And I asked him if I could marry Ruth. And nowadays people don't have that respect. They think you're old fashioned.
Hey, my son-in-law did, so I'm proud of him.
Yeah, but you're like, today that's not as common, but I think it's needed. It shows reverence and respect for the father and the home. And she was grown already and out of his house, but I love her family and care about them, and I wanted that to go well. And so anyhow, his response to me when I asked if I could marry her, and I said, I won't. I told him, I said, I won't. I'm not going to ask her if I can marry her if you say no, and I'm not going anywhere, but we need to have some conversations about what that looks like so that you feel comfortable for me to be able to marry your daughter. And his first question was, what is your plan to take care of my daughter? And that plan that I had it with me in a little like leather bound bag thing that I had with me. So I said to him, I said, can I show you something? And I had it put in clear sheets and bound, and I felt real special pulling that thing out of the bag and sitting in front of him and said, here's my 37-page plan. And it had floor plans for a house on it. It had my credit report. It had, like everything was there. And it was clearly defined. And I had a multitude of wise counsel around me at that time. And so that set us off on our journey. And like I said, we've been married for a little over 11 years, but Kennelin's law here, I think, is pretty valuable.
No, that's very applicable to that.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's such a great story. That's cool. That is
Thanks,
really
man.
Cool.
I like telling it. It means a lot to me because it was a huge inflection point in my life where I decided, like, this is where we're going. This is what I'm doing.
So you go from being a bouncer in a biker bar and busting teeth on Friday nights to 2 years later, you have a 37-page action plan, credit report and everything included, floor plans for a house, everything, to be able to hand to the man that you want to marry his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And which she'd never been married. She never like she was like the epitome of the quiet girl in the corner, right? That's from what you told me.
Is what I like to call silent wisdom. She's very peaceful, very gentle, very quiet, and she had a very opposite, very separate, completely opposite upbringing than I did. I mean, several years before that, to put that in perspective, I can remember, guys, if you are one of my clients, don't drop me as your realtor. I'm just going to be honest with you, though. I'm a very professional guy. I'm very squared away. This is not who I am, but I do have a skill set. I probably shouldn't have, but I do. And I do love to train jiu-jitsu still, and I still fight just to keep myself in shape and to take care of my body and my family. But there was a point in my life, I can remember holding 3 guys at knife point and making them watch while my friend choked their friend out. And I look over behind me, and the police department had pulled up, and they were leaning against their car smiling. And they were like, we're not getting in this. And you look around, and there's, biker patches and leather vest jackets everywhere. And they had one guy bent over a car, zip tied. And one of the guys I rolled with, he was a bounty hunter at the time. And I went from all of that to my idea of a good life would have been dying in a blaze of glory in the street, protecting a friend. But I went from all of that, took all that energy and that strength and turned it into a plan to take care of my wife and my kids. And so now we do have 4 kids. We have an even number of kids. We've checked off every box on the plan that we had. And now I've got a new 70-page plan that we're certainly working on. And part of that is to help kids get adopted. And we got a real estate company and then the podcast. And you're a part of that. So,
and let's just say, to the glory of God, man.
It's all good, man. All God. I can't really take credit for that. And, some of the guys in my family are pretty tough guys. So I learned from some interesting characters.
Right. And we connected on that too, right? Like I grew up kind of a rough family, but yeah. I was a wrestler growing up.
Would you say like you were a state champ twice?
Yeah. Twice in high school, 8th grade state champion, freestyle Greco-Roman.
Man, that's like, solid, dude.
I wrestled in college, went to college on a fluoride wrestling scholarship. I trained fighters for 15 years. But we connect on that. And we're both professionals in our realm. We do what we need to do, but we always have that little thing in the back that's like
that on-off switch.
Yeah,
man. It's. I don't want to steal someone else's idea. Give credit where credit's due. Jordan Peterson has a quote. I think he says something to the effect of that you should become an absolute monster and then have it under self-control, because a good man is not a weak man who can do nothing. You're only nice because you have no other option if you're weak. But if you're a strong man, like a heavy hitter, I call them pipe hitters where I came from. Yep. Yeah. There's consequences for talking to a man like that a certain way. I mean, assuming that you don't have the Lord in your life and you're not self-controlled, but there's consequences for crossing somebody like that. And you want to be that kind of guy, not to be a bully, but you want to have it under control. You want to have it under self-control. And I think that that's a strong man. That's a good man that leads his family well, because, in history, the weakest people have been the most dangerous people in history that we've seen.
Right.
And
they're the ones that lash out, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, having a plan for who you want to be as a man or a woman, ladies, if you're listening to this, for you too, like, you can be a formidable foe to somebody. My wife trains Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with me, and I'm really proud of her. She's solid. She's pretty great. And
well, let this be, ladies, if you're watching, raise your level of expectation, please.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's about the plan though too, man. And what I've always found though is you get a man to a point where he's writing down plans with great clarity like this. It's a symptom of something more going on inside of him anyway. So that need to improve or to do better or to pursue the Lord and to become the guy that you need to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
You writing these clear plans tends to be a secondary, tertiary domino that gets knocked down after you have this realization in your life. And that's not always the case. I mean, I know some guys who just methodically through their whole life, that's who they've been, right? Others, it's just been a realization. And for me, I had a lot of strength early on and a lot of get up and go, but it was just kind of needed to be redirected. So
understood. Yeah. Well, so that is you being clear. That's about as clear as you can get, dude.
No,
37 pages in a binder to hand to a dad upon asking for his daughter's hand in marriage. Mm-hmm. And he thought he was going to trip you up with what's your plan. Well, sir, here you go. That's pretty freaking cool.
Her dad's such an awesome guy. I don't know if he's trying to trip me up more so than he was just like had a deep concern for that. Cause he's a good
as a dad should.
Oh, for sure, man. I mean, I can't blame him. Right.
Right.
And I went down to Texas recently, guys. I'm from Texas, live in the Denver area, but we went down to visit and I actually brought that up to him. I said, if you remember, I wrote this, this whatever 37-page plan and all of those things are done. And he just kind of smiled at me. But I was like, now we're on to the next plan. So write your plans down, and whether it be in business or in life, I think they both connect. And if you're a business owner, sometimes that business life bleeds into personal. So
right.
Having those plans in place is important. I jumped the gun earlier. I was going to jump to number 2 before we went on that tangent.
Get on it.
Yeah, number 2 was Walson's Law. So basically, if I had to sum this up in one sentence, it would say, if you put information and intelligence first at all times, the money will come. And so it's basically a way of saying, don't just focus on making money. Focus on adding value and becoming a subject matter expert in your field or chosen industry, right? Like, go get really good at something and people will see that. They'll see the value there. The money will come. And, there's...
Be the expert.
Be the expert. And, we just finished up a podcast and it was about things you may not know about, just random whatnots. Normally we have a structured podcast with, bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever. That one was more talking about the Titan sub, but then we got into, after talking about the Titanic and all that, we were getting into the future of AI and becoming a subject matter expert in your field and like technology and innovation and things like that. I don't care what field you're in. If you're in engineering, I have the engineering background, but I have the real estate company. We're incorporating AI into our business, and so are you. And so, focusing on being a leader in your field will pay you dividends in the long run, because people don't really care about your little salesman pitch. What they want to know is what can you really do for them? What value can you really add? And if you don't have the value, they're going to go to somebody else who they like better. Maybe their personality is better or whatever. And you should probably be a people person if you can, but knowing the information is important too. You can't just know the information and focus on being an expert if you're socially awkward, and don't know how to deal with people too. So I think those kind of go hand in hand with each other. What are your thoughts?
It's funny because, we're talking about, bullies and growing up and doing all that stuff. Right. I thought I was an introvert growing up. Like I honestly did. Like I was so I didn't think I was the people person and stuff like that. Right. I loved people. Mm-hmm. I was the anti-bully. I would if I saw somebody getting bullied, I would straighten it up right now.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about having the intelligence and being personable and stuff like that too. Yeah. When I got into college, that's when I came out of my shell. Mm-hmm. I figured out that I love people. I really do. And you're right. I like your point on that is you can have all the intelligence you want in the world, but if you cannot communicate it clearly, if you cannot communicate it clearly mm-hmm. and you're just not personable, if you literally talk like a robot, if you show no emotion, you show no compassion, you cannot understand. We've gone over this before. One of Stephen Covey's laws is seek first to understand, then to be understood. If you cannot be somewhat empathetic to somebody's position, to understand where they're coming from, things like that, you are not going to, it doesn't matter how much intelligence you have. but you got to have the intelligence to back up the emotion. Like you have to, so there's a balance.
Well, in the world we're in today, we're heading into a place where it's going to require a new breed of businessmen or businesswoman. It's not so much, and it's not going to be as much about, well, how much can you sell? People are going to want to know what you know as well. Like, what do you have to back that up with? They're going to want hard data. And in the world of AI, in the world of technology and fast flowing information, your average person today is well above the average it was 30 years ago, even. And that's a generalized statement, right? I don't have the data to back that up, but it's common sense.
You can be debunked in 30 seconds.
Easy.
With somebody's phone.
Yeah, and you get the Google warriors, but like the fact that you can say to yourself, I want to know about this topic. You go type it up, you go look at it, and it's right at your fingertips. The general populace can do that now, and you're not special if that's all you know how to do.
Right.
And so if you're in sales or whatever, technology, even like all the more in technology, but I think that that's really important, that you need to be able to focus on the information. You need to know, your intelligence needs to be there about what you're doing. You need to be a competent professional with a collegiate mannerism. Like,
that's a good way to put it. Yeah. I like it. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that was number 2.
All right. So let's go to number 3, Falkland's Law. Okay. Now, you know what? All right. I'm going to just show my age. I can't read it. This is sad. I know. Here we go, guys.
That's funny.
The first state of humility. There we go. Falkland's Law. It states that postpone decision making and don't think about it if it's not needed right now. So if it's not an emergency, if it's not critical, if it's not crucial, if it's not like something that has to be talked about and decided upon right now, this second, and it's not life and death, sleep on it.
Yeah. Think
on it. See what else transpires that you can use as data to pull from.
Man, it's okay to look at someone and say, "Hey, can I answer that later? I need some time.
Let me get back to you on that.
Let me get back to you on that." It's okay to do that. Now, it's lame if you don't ever get back to them. Like, don't be that
always
guy.
follow through.
Follow through on what you say you're going to do.
That's integrity.
Yeah, but like, okay, so for example, let's say that you have a situation going on and you're trying to assess what the right move is or what's next or how to handle it. Maybe it's in your interpersonal life, social life, and you've got some conflict with a couple of individuals and you're trying to understand, okay, who's right, what's going on. A lot of times, if you're like, let me get back to you on that, if they're asking you to help them handle it, you can kind of let things unfold. And sometimes, because you've given it more time, new things happen that then change the context of the original question. And you would answer that question completely different today had you known that was going to occur. So giving it a few more days to kind of like let things unfold is really wise in business. It's wise in your life.
Or not just a few days, right? You're in first grade. Girls have cooties. In 9th grade, new information.
That's awful, Mark. You're not wrong. Spoken from the guy's perspective. But yeah, man, I mean, that's to me, it's an important law to live by. And, having that measured approach to say, man, I'm going to just hold off. I don't want to answer this right now. Or I've had somebody tell me before, like, hey, I'm going to answer you, but I reserve the right to revise my answer if I have more information. And I think that's okay too.
Oh, I think that's awesome. Yeah. I've never heard it put that way. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to give you an answer right now, but I reserve my right to revise that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Great.
Cool.
The next law, I think everybody knows this one in one way or another. Yeah. Murphy's Law.
Yeah.
What we fear most often comes true.
Or what can go wrong will go wrong.
Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. I used to work with my cousin on signs, like the billboards, the high-rise signs, all that. We had the longest crane We ran the longest crane in the state, tallest crane. It was 110 foot. And when you're 110 foot up in a round tube crane that's like a fishing pole in the Wyoming wind, like my cousin literally, he's like,
no, thank you.
He's like, Murphy is a sign god. That's what he'd say. He said, Murphy's a sign god because anything that can go wrong will go wrong. We had to improvise so much out in the field. It was like, there was one time I was in Gillette, Wyoming in the middle of a blizzard, and we literally had to survey this sign. We had to get measurements on the face of this Holiday Inn sign. I'll never forget this. And I was in the basket because
you're up in the air in a blizzard.
In a blizzard.
No.
This blizzard was so bad that I could not, like, this was not a crane that you could run from. This wasn't like a JLG where you had the controls here. You had to give the controls, you had to give the commands to get in position to the person running the crane, my cousin down below. You know, he is my older cousin, so of course
I'm shivering with a walkie-talkie.
No, yelling or hand signals.
Oh, no.
Like, boom out, like whatever. The blizzard was so bad I couldn't see him on the deck 100 foot below. And I'm up there with a broomstick, my tape measure taped to a broomstick. Because I couldn't quite reach the top of the sign, trying to measure this Holiday Inn sign.
Man, that's sketchy.
And so we could put new faces in it later on that year. Thank goodness I was not on that job long enough to put those faces in, because that would have sucked.
So in terms of Murphy's Law, how does that connect?
Anything that can go wrong will go wrong, like especially working on signs in Wyoming. One time, this other time, we came into the shop one day, and if any of you gone up I-25, the intersection I-25 and I-80, there's a pole sign that's La Quinta and Denny's, right? So it's one of those that goes up and it splits, and then there's a pipe through each one and a big sign. Big signs in Wyoming just don't get along, but you know, they still got to have them.
It's super windy there, right?
Bad. It's bad. Yeah, Wyoming. So we literally had to pull off a job. We headed back to the shop. It was about noon, and told the boss, yeah, it's too dangerous up there to get things done. He goes, yeah, well, you guys can't go home yet. The La Quinta sign just broke free. Literally, it was up there spinning like this. And of course, me being the younger cousin, I loved working with my cousin, by the way. We had so much fun.
But you're low man on totem pole?
I'm low man on totem pole.
Yeah.
So I've got my welding hood on in the basket with me. I've got the welding leads out. And he's sending me up there, and I get the access hatch open. And so I'm literally bracing as much as I can up against this sign to keep it from moving, just so I can strike an arc and try and get it to stick in like 70-mile-an-hour winds.
No, man.
And you got to drop your hood and go. You got to drop your hood and go dark, like before you strike your arc, right? So yeah, Murphy's a jerk.
Well, I'll tell you what, it sounds like you guys worked for a living, that's for sure.
Right?
That's crazy, man. I would add like one thing to Murphy's Law.
Yeah. Application
to business and life. So if you know about Murphy's Law, which it's probably the most popular one out there, what can go wrong will go wrong, or what you fear most oftentimes is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
Like it happens. So here's the deal, guys. Like, don't live in fear, but also have a plan. And let's do, like, you know, when I was doing a lot of investment analysis, there were three major scenarios that we would run. We would do a P90, a P50, and a P10. And so we would say to ourselves, if this investment goes really well, that's like a P10. There's a 10% chance that this goes well. So 1 out of 10 chance that this actually just goes perfect. We smack it out of the park. It's better than we thought, right? A P90 was like, there's a 90% chance, like this is like probably your lower performance, like it's just like your worst case scenario almost. Like there's a 90% chance that'll occur. So we called it a P90, or your most likely. And then your P50 was like your middle of the road. Like you're sort of, I think P50 is actually your most likely. So P90 was like your worst case scenario. Like we're almost sure or guaranteed that we'll have this performance because our projections are so low on the performance of this investment that we have high confidence. We're like 90% confident that at least this will happen, right? So when you're in business, making those decisions and saying, I'm going to plan for that like worst case, best case, and middle of the road scenario, would be a recommendation.
Is it kind of like if you can live with the worst case?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you can live with the worst case, kind of go for it. If you can't live with the worst case, then probably shouldn't.
Well, but like there's value in that P50 in the P10, right? Because a lot of times if you're trying, like, okay, so in business, say you're going before some investors, take Shark Tank, for example. Those guys that go to Shark Tank, a lot of people see those shows, they can understand that. So if you say to yourself, hey, here's my upside, here's what we stand to gain if this goes right, because it doesn't always go bad. Having that modeling, like bracketed, best case, worst case, is valuable as you're selling a project or you're assessing the risk of that project at certain risk levels, right? So in business, that's a valuable thing to do. In life, I would say just plan, like you're saying, plan for the worst case scenario. And if something better than that happens, then you're okay. But even then, like, maybe you want to take a little risk. Depends on who you are.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to what I was saying on the first point too, right? It's like the keys that we're looking at in our law and our principles, or what, even before we got to the first point, is like, what would you say my rules are? Being positive. That goes right here. Like how many people do you hear like, I knew this wasn't going to work. I knew this wasn't going to work. Like seriously, you hear that? I knew it. I just knew this wasn't going to work. It's like, yeah. Do you think maybe your attitude towards it kind of created that problem? Mm-hmm. Like, honestly, like,
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Like, did you do this half-assed? Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of people that just like half-heartedly do something,
right?
And then they're like, I knew this wouldn't work. It's like, did you give it your all? Did you really give it your all?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you?
And what that's a good way to combat Murphy's Law, man. Like, you can't. Ron Swanson says, I don't half-ass a bunch of things, I whole-ass one thing or something like that. I don't know, but it's yeah, man, I don't think there's anything wrong with planning for that worst case scenario as like a baseline. And as a matter of fact, Murphy's Law says you should.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, when you go into the business side of it, and I think this is touching on what you're getting at, is look at that upside, focus on that upside, and make the plans for the worst case scenario so that either way you're okay. Like, if this thing can be executed under the worst case scenario, you should move forward with it.
But how many people use that worst case scenario as a give up? Like, I'm tired.
That's their only indicator or marker that they go on.
Right. And it's like, okay, you know what? If I stop now, we've made the worst case and we can live with that. Okay, I'm done. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
That's like, okay. That's like, let's equate that to wrestling, right? Let's just go it. Like, all right, I made it to the first 2 weeks of practice, or I made JV. I'm good. Uh-huh. It's like, really? You're happy just being like second string JV, first string JV? How about you? Our coach always made the JV guys challenge the varsity guys every week. Every week, you still had a challenge for that position. I remember my best friend's little brother, Stuart. He was 2 years younger than me, and like it sucks. I feel sorry for him when you are second string behind a state champion, returning state champion, and you're like,
you're stuck. You're not going anywhere.
Like, do we have to do? He literally come out there one week. He's like, do we have to do this? I'm like, yeah, sorry, Stu. We do.
But man, I mean, well, you know what though? For like in your coach's defense, like, what if that state champion starts sleeping on the job and kind of gets comfortable, right? Like,
right.
It's a good way to assess that out and be able to like.
And Stuart was a great wrestler in his own right.
Yeah.
He's a pharmacist up in Gillette, Wyoming now.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy. Like literally my best friend's little brother.
Yeah.
He's like, do we have to do this? Yes, Stu. We do.
Yeah. So plan for worst case scenario in business. Look at a couple of different risk factors, and Murphy's Law drives that, guys.
Right.
So have a plan.
Yeah. Where I was going with that is like if you just settled, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
If you just settled, you can really get out there and hump it, and really put it in and say, this is possible. Mm-hmm. So if this is possible, why am I going to settle for this?
Yeah. Why is that my baseline?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, that's all I had on Murphy's Law.
Yeah.
I'll cover number 5. Number 5 is Gilbert's Law or Gilbert's Rule.
This dude was a long time ago, by the way.
Yeah. So yeah, he was an American politician from, what was it, back in like 1907.
He died in 1907.
Died in 1907.
Born in 1838. So I'm sure he knew Abe.
A little bit old school, huh?
Yeah, slightly.
Basically, what Gilbert's Law says is that the biggest problem with a job is that no one is going to tell you what to do. And so I want to tweak that a little bit, and we'll call it a modified Gilbert's Law. My spin on it is this, is that the problem with being an entrepreneur, or the problem with owning your own business, is that no one's going to tell you the next step. No one's going to tell you what to do. The problem, I could also word it like this. The problem with a really good job is that if you're getting paid well, they're probably not going to tell you what to do. They're going to expect that you know what to do. You're going to be able to make cognizant decisions. You're going to be able to pivot. You're going to be like, that didn't work. I have context here. Common sense says that I need to try these things. And I have the intellect and the knowledge. Going back up here to Walson's Law, focusing on the information and intelligence. I have the information and intelligence that I am the kind of person that I can adjust and I can make my own decisions. I can change, and I don't need my boss holding my hand. I don't need somebody walking me into the water and showing me how to drink it. I'm expected to innovate. I'm expected to move with the flow and be able to pivot and adjust and be strategic and be a strong intellectual in my job. And so Gilbert's Law, modified Pat's way, I guess you would, whatever you want to call it, would be that the biggest problem with a job is that no one tells you what to do, but especially if you're a business owner, especially if you've got a really good job that's high paying.
And so, let's take this all the way back to podcast number 2, where we're talking about your tribe, bro.
Yeah.
Like you nobody's telling you what to do, but you better surround yourself with some people that you can get some advice from.
I'll tell you what, being able to pick the phone up and call somebody and ask a few questions is valuable. But what if you don't have that day? Maybe that person's on vacation. Maybe they can't pick their phone up and answer you. Gilbert's Law, and that fallback. So have the mindset that, like, just assume no one's going to hold your hand. Now,
you can't put it on the back burner just because you can't get a hold of somebody.
You can't put it on the back burner. You got to meet your deadlines, but also don't be, I don't want to go too far, because you don't want to be afraid to ask for help.
Right.
Sometimes you do need to say, I am at a roadblock. We need to have a work session. And you and I do that a lot of times. I mean, you're a business, you got your own stuff, I've got mine, but our stuff overlaps. And I mean, we've had moments where I'm like, hey, Mark, let's go sit down. Let's have like a work session. Let's do this. And, release that block. There's a point, there's a right. Jumping off point where I've spent too much time trying to solve the problem. I'm stuck. Now I've become inefficient. I do need to reach out for that help. So there needs to be some wisdom there. But the point is that if you go in with the assumption that nobody's going to hold your hand, you work differently, you think differently, you move differently in the work that you're doing, in the job you might be doing. In leadership roles, leaders are faced with this concept all the time. So you could just call, hey, I have a leader, my boss, I can just ask them. Who does the boss ask? Right? So
you want to be the boss?
I mean, some people think they do until they get there and they realize they don't really have that it factor that they need. And that's the hard reality. Mm-hmm. And
like, I could do his job. Oh, he's taking these vacations. Look at, he's driving that nice car. It's like, you know what?
Might be a reason.
There's a lot of stress that's behind that car.
A lot of stress there. There's a mentality. Not always. Sometimes nepotism takes its toll. I've seen that play out. But, it's...
But usually when the heat is turned up, the chaff burns away.
That's right. Get your foot in the door, but you got to stay there.
That's right. That's right.
So Gilbert's Law modified, and I guess what would be good. I mean, I'm done. Do you have anything else to add? Or?
I don't. I just think that primarily there are just some fundamentals. I think that's the point we're trying to make. There are some fundamental principles that apply to life and business that, a lot of us would be better off, a lot better off if we started applying them to our world. There are also biblical principles. There are so many other like principles that we could apply that we could take months putting these all together, right? But this is just a good broad stroke that can apply to anybody that's watching this. And if you literally apply these 5, you dive deep and you put these 5 principles, laws for life and business then you apply them to action in your life, you're good.
Yeah, it'll get you a pretty good ways down the road. And I think what we could do here, I'm going to just do a quick summary on these real quick. I'm going to run the gauntlet. So the 5 laws for life and business. Number 1, Kinlan's Law. If you can write the problem down clearly, then the issue is pretty much half solved. Number 2 is Walson's Law. If you focus on the information and the intelligence first at all times, then the money will come. Number 3 is Falkland's Law. Basically, postpone your decision making and don't think. Maybe you need to think about it for a while. Give some time to think. You don't have to answer right away. Number 4, Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will go wrong. Oftentimes, what we fear most is what actually occurs. Self-fulfilling prophecies are a real thing, so be aware of that. And then number 5 is Gilbert's Law. The biggest problem with a good job or being an entrepreneur or a business owner is that no one is going to be there to hold your hand and tell you what to do. So be able to have some thought about you and have some common sense and know what to do. Be able to be a self-thinker, self-starter, and a finisher.
Right.
That's it.
All right. So I think that's it for this podcast. Next week, we're going to do a deeper dive on some of the distractions that happen when there are other things are going on. So
what Mark's talking to. So we our episode 5. You've seen that. It talks about the Titan submersible that collapsed and the connections to the Titanic and all the distractions around that. There was a lot of stuff that was occurring on the back end that really wasn't publicized as much, that people weren't paying attention to. And so we wanted to basically go in and just highlight some of those things and just show you guys that, what you see, what's shown to you may not necessarily be what's really happening behind the scenes as well. So we're not accusing anyone of anything, but it'll be a nice primer to help you think about what reality really is. And as you're a business owner or a leader in your family or whatever, these principles are important. So stay tuned for episode 7. That's going to be out the week after next. And actually next week, excuse me. Yeah, and we'll go from there. But in the meantime, if you like what you saw, follow us on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the places. And give us a call, give us a shout if you need anything.
Contact info